It's 2025. Saying things like Marxism is bad and racism is bad is seen as controversial. I recently made a video talking about Nick Fuentes, and what I see is incorrect, wrong, immoral views that Nick holds about race. Alright, I shot the entire video, then went back and watched a couple hours more of Nick talking about race. So I'm actually going to jump in here a few times to add some things. Nick has said some things, and I think of a few possibilities. A, he's gaslighting, and I hope that's not the case. I'm not trying to insult his character. B, he has contradictions in his views. Or C, he hasn't quite come to full clarity on what he thinks about this issue. Nick contradicts himself.
For the purpose of understanding, I'd say my views are I'm a racialist.
What did you disagree with him on?
He is a ideological racialist. And I believe that goes too far.
He said interracial marriage isn't a sin, it's just a preference of his.
Yeah, it's not that I don't think there should be interracial marriage. I'm Catholic, so as you know, it's not a sin to be in an interracial marriage.
Dude, I couldn't care less if you want to marry a white woman. I don't care if a black man wants to marry a black woman. I don't think that's necessarily racist, of course. I don't care. But then he says sex with a person of a different race is degenerate.
You said that Nick is a white supremacist. I'm curious to what he said specifically that makes you think that.
Well, I did hear leaked audio of you comparing a white woman having sex with a dog to having sex with a black man and saying that it was basically the same level of degeneracy. And that was leaked audio. So I felt like that was kind of telling about what you might say behind the scenes.
Yeah, and
maybe that was a joke?
Well, no. I mean, I can explain the...
It didn't sound like a joke.
Well, hang on. I can explain the context of that. So that's the part that wasn't recorded, is I'm saying I'm against race mixing. Well, she sees me saying something that you're not supposed to say and says, I'm going to cancel this guy. So she gets her phone out and starts recording and says, hey, Nick, so do you think that having to the black guy is the same as having to the dog? So I didn't say that. Those were not my words. I was saying I'm against race mixing. She gets the phone out and frames it that way. And I said, no. And Adam, you saw the clip. I said, no, it's not the same. I said, but they both be degenerate. I said, they both be wrong. And then the same way that I would say, yeah, incest is wrong. Is incest the same as bestiality? No. Is rape the same as bestiality? These are all things which I would consider wrong.
So which is it? This concern's boiled down in one tweet. Nick says the problem is not culture, the problem is not godlessness, and here he's probably talking about gang violence, inner city crime, something like this. The problem is not godlessness, he says, it's race. Really? The problem isn't godlessness. It's not bad ideas, it's not a lack of virtue, it's race? Yeah, Nick, that's a problem.
I am racist, I would say.
One of the reasons I almost didn't make this video is because Nick says, whatever I say about my concerns about Nick's views, man, it is so possible that his followers are going to say, yeah, but he said this over here. And it would be true, because Nick says a lot of things, and Nick talks for a living.
It doesn't mean that blacks are dumber than whites. Europeans are smarter.
But lay aside the things that he says he points out real problems with mass immigration, unmitigated, unchecked immigration that Barack Obama would say was a problem just a few years ago. He'll say things about Marxism or communism. He'll describe problems in the world, and it is resonating with lots of people. And I'm under no illusion that whatever I say, this guy is still going to blow up in conservative circles. It just is what it is. I'm under no illusion that I'm going to change that, but my point is, set the things aside that you agree with. My charitable interpretation of Nick that I choose to currently have is that he has both Christian and Catholic beliefs, and he has these leftovers from his younger years of actual racialism, actually racist views. And it could be that he's changing his views towards more, if he's not gaslighting and lying, hopefully he's changing his views to be more Christian. And I hope that's what him and his followers continue to do. I hope the Christian side wins out, and these racialist views are dropped. But if you're not on the right, it's important to know why so many people are listening to Nick. Two reasons. These are very important. One, Charlie Kirk's death was a flashpoint. Because here's what I noticed. And if I noticed it, millions of other people noticed it too. So many of my friends have said this. If you hold views that are considered normal 10 years ago, not alt-right, not far-right, just normal, moderate views that a lot of liberals still hold, you can be considered a Nazi.
Hey Nazis, can you set up somewhere where I can avoid you easily?
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Ah, you Nazi. Watch your neck.
Thanks.
A fascist, and so many people, not everyone on the left, but so many people will mock your death. Applaud if you get shot in the neck and bleed out in front of your family, they will laugh and cheer and applaud and sing. And then say, maybe we should kill some more people like you. That really showed people the gravity of the situation on the right. Nick Fuentes didn't create that environment. And so now, what I'm concerned with is that all the accusations of Nazism and fascism that don't land, they're not true about so many of us. I've been called a Nazi so many times. I've been called a fascist so many times. I'm not a fascist, I'm not a Nazi. That's deeply insulting to me. Because now they see the threat of how far the left is willing to go, or tolerate at least, of actually murder, 2 assassination attempts against the president, the death of Charlie Kirk, for political, ideological reasons, some school shootings that are ideologically driven, and people will shrug it off or even laugh on the left. And so now, they're a little bit numb to that. They don't care so much. And I'm concerned that they're going to actually let in some bad things, reacting away from one bad thing into another. Another reason so many people are listening to this guy is because if you're a center-left person, I'm going to assume you're a decent person. I'm just going to assume you're a decent-minded person if you're a liberal, conservative, moderate. You probably have no idea the amount of young men I've talked to who feel as though society is just hates them, hates everything about them, that there are people actively trying to destroy Western civilization that actively are just applauding it because they think it's evil. They blame whiteness for the problems in the world. And these men feel like they are just targets.
The Canada, United States line.
White man, how dare you?
You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
White
Folks.
White.
Trash.
White supremacy.
White woman.
White boy.
White entitlement.
White.
Centering.
White.
Silent.
Tired of straight white men having the power and everything, you know? And it's like, we as women of color, as like students at this university, like we're very much capable of certain things, and we don't have the same privileges that are offered to straight white men.
And I've been hearing that from a lot of the ladies that I've been talking to today. Talk to me about what some of those privileges are that, you know, straight white men have that you don't have. Talk to me about that.
I think, I don't really know. Have you ever experienced like a specific instance?
And some of these guys they're just not bad people. They're just normal guys that you'd see in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Some of them are black. Some of them are homosexual. I've talked to so many people. But particularly straight, made-up term to me, white Christian men. I've talked to many men younger than myself, and older, but especially younger, who have a very difficult time finding a spouse. Not because they're unattractive, not because they're not successful, not because they're weirdos, but because values. I think the devil has been playing 5D chess, and he's been playing us for fools, left, right, across the board for a long time. As the unity of the narrative of the West collapses, values diverge between people groups. And so now women have been buying into this radical third wave feminism, and beyond that into some type of a fourth wave insane feminism.
I think what made me start an OnlyFans in the beginning is because I really wanted to get an apartment. So yeah, it's going really well.
How do you both feel about your mom opening up an account?
You know, it's men should not objectify women and harass them or sexualize them. I'm all on board with that. But there's also this thing where now some men feel as though they can't even approach a woman to ask her on a date. And women have commented on this online. It's become such an awkward thing where values are diverging. We're all being isolated and fragmented into our little groups and into ourselves. And now white men are being blamed for the problem, and they're being isolated. And so many of these guys feel like they're hopeless, they can't find a spouse, and they want to start a family, and it's just not good. Some of them have daughters. I'm thinking of one guy, he works 60, 70 hours a week, hard mechanic job to support his daughter. He gets no thanks for it, and then he feels like he's also blamed by society for the world's problems. Anytime you start blaming one people group for the world's problems, you're blaming the Jews. We say, I don't blame the Jews for all the world's problems, just most of them. I'm going to blame white men for the world's problems. Not all. You say, no, I'm not blaming the white men for all the world's problems, just quite a few of them. Well, I'm not blaming black people for all the world's problems, but really, if you think about it, most of society's, you're missing it. And that's what's happening across the board, many different directions. It's a problem. The hatred going all these different directions is awful. I think we've fallen for some satanic traps here. For the last at least decade or so in pop culture, so many movies, commercials, sporting events, everything. I think it's wonderful that black Americans are fully included in American life. Do not hear me saying the wrong thing. But what's happened is a fixation on identity and self-expression. And in this postmodern neo-Marxist nonsense, it's become my identity and self-expression and a power struggle against your identity and self-expression.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
And so at some point, the representation of black people on TV wasn't organic or natural or even welcoming. It was definitely an expression of the power struggle that they see happening.
Then Cleopatra. My father's will names me co-ruler of Egypt.
I think these people probably meant well. They're just trying to show representation of marginalized people groups, which is not a bad thing. But that's not really all that was happening. This was a self-expression of my identity against the world in a power struggle. Now I'm afraid that the right has bought into this for a while now, but increasingly so. So now you have young white men who are trying to express their white nationalist identity in a power struggle against whatever else nonsense is out there.
Because we have the right to be proud of who we are. We as white people have a right to be proud of our unique heritage and to stand up for the right for our children to exist.
You want to know how I know this is modernist? I'm going to get to the real reason in a second, but right off the bat, there weren't even concepts of race or identity before the modern world, before the colonial age. These are all very modernist concepts and postmodern concepts. And I'm concerned that Nick has bought into actually racist views and that the Catholicism he holds, I really hope that wins out. I hope he's evolving in his views and he's dropping this nonsense. But it does seem like many of his followers have bought into this almost struggle of identity, this power struggle of my identity versus your identity. And that again is postmodernist. I want to talk about why racism is wrong. I think it's silly that this needs to be talked about. Growing up, I saw racism going multiple ways. I grew up in the, mostly 90s in the Deep South, but we moved around. And I definitely saw racism going many ways. But for the most part, people my age, we just played together with black people, white people, Asian people. And it just wasn't something we thought about. We just sort of learned intuitively that racism was not good.
Francois Clemens, hi, welcome.
Thank you. How you doing?
Fine, how are you today?
Fine.
My feet were tired, so I thought I'd just soak them for a while in this water.
Does it make them feel better?
It does. Would you like to try?
Sure.
But I want to make a more philosophical argument, theological argument for why racism is immoral and why it does not fit with Christianity, and why I think Nick is drawing from a very materialist view. We'll slow down and do an abstract. I think you guys are smart, so you can hang with the abstract thought. If you're capable of higher level thought, you can handle this survey. We'll do this quick survey, and then I'll give you a quick argument for why racism is wrong. Since modern philosophy began, that's with Descartes, more and more, the trend has been towards a reduced view of the world and humanity. We've thought of the world not as this enchanted place, the word is enchantment, in the old world, whether it's ancient, whether it's pagan, whether it's Christian, whether it's Catholic. The old world thought of the world and in terms of there's a transcendent immaterial layer to the world. The modern world, with Descartes, who still believed in God, by the way, fell more and more into skepticism, more and more into rationalism and empiricism, and thought in a trend more and more towards thinking of the world as a machine. It's not this enchanted, mysterious, beautiful place full of mystery and meaning and good and evil. It's more and more a material machine that ticks. And the more we can use our science and reason to figure it out, the more we can just solve our problems with democracy and freedom and science. And I think that's a failed project, by the way. It is failed, fundamentally failed. Science is a great thing. It's a good tool. I think freedom properly understood is a good thing. We're at risk of losing that. But to think primarily in terms that these rationalist, empiricist ideas are going to save us, it's failed. And that's led to postmodernism. But the trend has been the Enlightenment people, say 1700s, thought of the world as nature as something that we can sort of conquer with reason and science. And then you got movies like Jurassic Park, they're sort of trying to remind us, hold up, no matter how much you science this thing, nature is still powerful. There's still these black swan events that can happen, that these things that you don't expect that you can't plan for, and nature's just going to show you it's a lot more powerful than you think with your enlightenment, reason, and science, which I think is true.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
This even affected Christianity, and this is the point I'd like you to just, if you're a Christian, be careful about this. As philosophy and theology became more and more disenchanted with the world, and we're part of that with humanity, the more it began to think as a trend in terms of matter and materialism. This did affect Christian theology and even apologetics. So think about, have you heard about the argument about the watch? If you see a watch laying in the woods, this comes from William Paley, the watchmaker. If you see a watch laying in the woods, you think, well, this really cool machine was designed by an engineer, a watchmaker. And if that's designed by a watchmaker, then I was designed by a people maker. The world was designed by a world maker. Now, while that's true, in some sense, you just start to see more and more the world's thought of it in terms of as a machine. Think Newton with his, laws of physics. I think Nick has adopted some of these ideas, and this is a misdiagnosis of the problem. So even though Descartes believed in God, even though Newton believed in God in some sense, even though even Jefferson, at least most of his life, believed in God in some sense, you have a very reduced concept of all of it, of God, of humanity, of the world. More and more, just a machine. Deists still technically, 16 through 1700s, they still thought that God existed. You say, well, they're not materialists, they're not atheists. Yeah, but it's increasingly an atheistic way to think about everything. Because sure, there's a spiritual realm, but God is so far out there somewhere, and God just sort of wound the watch and set it loose, and now we do our science and reason. Democracy, freedom, science, reason will be good. As Christendom fragmented, things began to place the old Christianity. Nationalism. I'm not talking here about nationalism in the sense that you can have some say over your border or your security. No, I'm talking about an ideology. It's a modernist ideology that came about from the fragmenting of Christendom. Nationalism became associated with race. This happened in Germany, and it didn't happen at once or overnight. It happened over time. More and more nationalism took that trend in Germany. Eventually, it got pretty extreme in Nazi Germany, associated with race. So that's sort of the general trend. There was a thing called scientific racism that arose not all at once. The foundations of it, the ideological foundations for it, no ideas happen in a vacuum. Just sort of trended that way. And then eventually, you had the rise of empires with nationalism, the British Empire, that did a lot of good things, but some bad things too. And the British Empire thought in terms of their sort of their Anglo heritage, their race. There's some bit of not cultural superiority. Leave all that aside. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about at some point you have a racial superiority feeling. This is explicitly stated in this general age of modernism, enlightenment, rationalism, thinking of the world as a machine, replacing Christendom with some various modernist ideologies. We went from Christendom and a more full, rich view of everything to, and they had some things wrong, but from Bible alone, to reason alone, to science alone, and now it's more like me alone, my self-expression, and that's part of the problem. My identity, my self-expression. And now it's just my expression of my identity versus your expression of your identity, and whoever's louder or more powerful wins. Bad place to be. While science is a good tool, science was used in this era of empire and nationalism and deism and reductionism and essentially the march towards atheism, if we're being blunt. It was used not just to observe traits about humanity, but to do what science can't do. And that's make ethical and moral judgments. I've tried to debate or reason with so many atheist people. I know so many people who grew up in church, especially really conservative fundamentalist churches, and most of them are just unbelievers now. Most of them. And even when I meet someone in a work environment or online, and I hear their story, it's sad, but I can see the pattern. This really rigorous fundamentalist or evangelical in the sense that very strict, not able to think outside of a box of, not able to think about culture or enjoy things. And then people leave that and they react against that into this atheist thing, thinking that they've left the unreasonable bigots, the people who are anti-science behind. And now they've accepted this left-leaning secularism, this left-leaning atheism, sometimes at this point Marxism, thinking that they have now found what's reasonable. And what I've tried to tell them, and they can laugh at me till they're blue in the face, but I'm not wrong. I almost went down that road myself. I spent a lot of time thinking it through. I've tried to tell them, look, science alone cannot, by nature, give you the things that you take for granted, human rights. Science can't get you to human rights. It can't get you to human dignity. It's an observational method. It's a good tool. You cannot prove why racism is wrong from science. It takes more than that. And so I'm trying to tell my left-leaning atheist friends, guys, you're undermining the foundation for everything you believe in. And I hope they get it soon, because that's what's happening. Science was used to promote something called eugenics. It was used, pseudoscience, but some data was used by the Nazis to promote their views of race. Did you hear Nick's argument?
So I'm trying to understand if you think that it's all black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored by, this is what's going on in America, this has failed for 1,000 reasons, welfarism has definitely, black people in 1940s, stand up. My grandfather, I talk about that denigration and the corrosion of culture. Yeah. That's happening. White, black, whatever you want to name it, there is this intentional corrosion of culture. So do you think it's literally, well, this is just what a black person is when they come out? Or do you think that post-welfare, LBJ, Great Society, this is what black Americans have become?
Well, I think it's more nature than people would like to believe. And I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic. When Europeans colonized Africa, they hadn't discovered the wheel. There's no two-story buildings.
And Nick says immediately. I think the uncomfortable truth is it's something intrinsic. What does he mean by that? He doesn't mean culture, he doesn't mean beliefs, he doesn't mean values. He thinks it's a problem with the race. And then what does he link that to? Some physical trait. First and foremost, this already has this huge logical gap. Nick's entire argument for blaming the problems in the black community on race are tied to his assumption that IQ is the primary cause of moral or of immorality, of ethical dysfunction. It's not. That's a non sequitur. He's doing causal overgeneralization. Even if Average black intelligence is lower than other races, which I don't grant that that's an accurate depiction of how things are. It's simply not the case that you can blame gang violence, the unjust things happening in society, of the cultural erosion, the decline of Western civilization, or anything else. Family breakdown in black communities, and really all communities now, on IQ. That's a non sequitur. His entire argument is not logical and collapses. It already jumps from race, this biological factor, to IQ, and then he's connecting that to the moral problems in society and what he sees as black culture. The moral problems. He thinks it's intrinsic based on a physical trait. But IQ is not synonymous with virtue. Some of the most moral people I've met, I'll say this again, some of the most moral people I've met are not the smartest. Some of the most moral people I've met are the simplest. There are saints who are farmers in Catholicism. Virtue and intelligence are not always the same, and oftentimes the elites in culture, the elites, the highest IQs, most power, most privilege, most money, sometimes those elites, particularly in the modern age, are some of the most unvirtuous, some of the most immoral. But you just can't get from that biology, even if it were true, to saying the gang violence in the inner cities is because of biology, because of IQ. But let me say this another way. This is the Catholic way of saying this in the Catechism. You can find more about this this is a Word on Fire put out Catholic social teaching. There's a document in here you can get, also free online, The Church in the Modern World. There are also several places where the Catholic Church has condemned Nazism, fascism, racialist theories that they understood were modernist, reductionist, scientism, racialist theories back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And what's interesting is every time the Catholic Church critiques Marxism or capitalism when it goes off the rails, or fascism, or racialism, or Nazism, it's doing it from the same place, the same understanding fundamentally of God and human nature and morality. And I'm going to tell you, you can't be a Catholic. There have been some Catholics who sympathize with the Nazi movement. You can't actually be a Catholic and be a Nazi. They're not compatible ideologically at a deep philosophical level. You can understand the nuances of history and why the World War II started, and that the Germans were being treated unfairly. But you can't be a Nazi and be a Catholic and be consistent. Here's what the Catholic Church summarizes in the Catechism nowadays. This is based on Genesis 1:26 and a deep understanding of human nature. The equality of men rests essentially on their dignity as persons and the rights that flow from it. Every form of social or cultural discrimination and fundamental personal rights on the ground of sex, race, color, social conditions, language, or religion must be curbed and eradicated as incompatible with God's design. On coming into the world, man is not equipped with everything he needs for developing his bodily and spiritual life. He needs others. Differences appear tied to age, physical abilities, intellectual and moral aptitudes, the benefit derived from social commerce, and the distribution of wealth. The talents are not always distributed equally. And that's from a reference to Scripture. To put a finer point on it, persons are not objects alone, they're subjects, and they have a transcendental element to them, so they have rights. The devil continues to play 5D chess, and we continue to allow ourselves to be played like fools. Nick is saying things that resonate with people who are probably wronged, or treated unfairly, or are losing hope, or feel that things have been taken from them. And he continues to say some things that make sense, or they're true, or partially true. And he continues to say things like, in defense of Christianity, and that he denounces beliefs that black people are inferior. But alongside that, he is making materialist evaluations of human beings, repeating the talking points of the scientific racists of the past. In history, this has always led to injustice. What the left's hearing is a confirmation of everything they thought about the right. I've even heard Nick say, maybe Hitler wasn't quite as bad as we thought. The reality is, if you took any people group, whether it's a town in Ireland or a town in Russia, and you took all the measurements of various physical traits, the length of the foot, athleticism, ability to spin a Marine Corps 3-mile PFT, IQ, mass of the brain, height, torso ratio to leg ratio, finger length, and everything else. Average lifespan, you would have differences between those people groups. And human dignity and moral worth, as Nick knows, depends upon none of it. The same reason we know racism is wrong is the same reasons, the same transcendent principles that tell us it's wrong to abort a child with Down syndrome, that they're no lesser of a human being than you or I. Because human beings are more than physical traits, as Nick knows. We are made in the image of God. Immanuel Kant said it like this. He thought that you couldn't physically observe. He's trying to fight off some of the things from David Hume after the collapse of traditional Christianity in the West. And he's trying to preserve the belief in the transcendent, so you can't get to the full nature of a thing merely by observing it. There is a thing in itself. And what we need to know is a person in itself, because persons are not merely objects. A rock is an object, but a person is also a subject. And so I speak as I, and to you as you, because you are a you, but to you, you're an I, you're a person, you're a subject. Nick's holding these two ways of thinking about humanity, morality, ethics, rather as a deist, on the march towards atheism in history, on the march towards Nazism. Whatever problems we see in America with, say, inner-city gang violence, the injustices or the Marxism taking away traditional Western cultures, the media jumping on, and they have, some white kid in Kentucky who goes to a march and a Native American man beats a drum in his face, and the media tried to destroy that kid's life and his family's life, wreck the school he went to, just awful stuff. And he won the lawsuit, by the way. But it shows the mindset. This isn't just. All of those problems, however, none of them, 0 of them, are caused by biology. Particularly the biology of one race. This is Marxism, this is postmodernism, this is deconstruction, all the bad ideas, and ultimately this stems from a rejection of 3 things. 1, we've rejected virtue. We rejected virtue, and now we marvel at the fact that people are no longer virtuous. So many of the problems in our society would be solved if we seek to act, develop, grow in virtue, courage, fortitude, wisdom, patience. This would ripple out through society if we have more virtuous judges, police officers, spouses, parents. This would strengthen society. The rejection of virtue, of belief in morality itself. So many people don't even believe morality is a thing anymore. The second cause of these problems that we're all seeing is Western civilization no longer has a unifying story. There is no philosophical substrate, a unifying way of viewing the world. For well over 1,500 years or so, the West has been built by Christianity, by this shared way of viewing our humanity, our shared identity in Christ, the world itself, God, morality, natural law. All these things developed in a Catholicism and a Christianity that gave us hospitals and universities and a unified Western civilization with a shared way of viewing the world, even with diversity of culture. Even when wars were fought between kings, there were still so many deep, fundamental, and psychological agreements. That's all been rejected by design. Nietzsche knew that when we rejected God, it was the death of civilization. And it has been. We're more divided philosophically now by far than we were in the Civil War in this country. My call, my urging is back to Christianity, back to God. Because the third thing is ultimately we rejected God. And this is what Solzhenitsyn said. All these bad things that happen is because that he saw in his lifetime with the Marxist revolution, the murder of so many people, is because man rejected God. Man forgot God. What I'd like to do, whether you're left, right, liberal, conservative, moderate, anything else, the problem is that we forgot God. So as always, I'm going to leave you with a simple thing. Repent and believe the gospel. A long time ago, someone saw that his civilization was falling apart, and he saw that Christ could unify it. And it turns out he was right, and civilization lasted under Christianity for a very, very, very long time, even with diversity. Do me a favor and pray for Nick Fuentes. I'm trying to pray for the guy. I've prayed for him several times in the last couple days, now that I'm watching him. Pray for Candace Owens, pray for Nick Fuentes. If you do me a favor, please pray for me. If you're watching this video, whether you're Catholic, Baptist, atheist, whatever, I'm praying for you, and I appreciate you. I hope you have a good day. Remember that someone loves you and that your life matters. Don't let the nihilists fool you. Everything that we do in this life matters. So live life and live it well. As always, thanks for watching. God bless.